Most spiritual traditions offer a door beyond suffering. Christianity promises heaven. Islam promises paradise. Even Buddhism, a tradition that begins by looking suffering in the face, offers liberation. Nirvana, the final exit. The place where the cycle stops and craving goes quiet. Different names, different maps, the same deep human hope that suffering does not get the final word. Now imagine you found that door. Everything you practiced worked. Every sacrifice led somewhere. The door is open. Peace is on the other side. And you turn around. Because you looked back and saw, still suffering, still falling, still burning in the darkest places existence contains, every single being who didn't make it yet, and you made a decision. You walked back into hell, and you made a vow you wouldn't leave. Not today, not in 1,000 years, not until every last being in every last hell realm walks through that door before you. His name is Ksitigarbha. He is standing in hell right now, and in the Buddhist understanding, he has never left. This is his story. Let's start with something that should bother you. His name means earth treasury, earth womb. He is one of the 4 principal bodhisattvas of East Asian Buddhism, alongside Guanyin, Manjushri, and Samantabhadra. China, Japan, Korea, Vietnam, centuries of devotion, countless statues, temple halls, roadside shrines, and prayers addressed to this single figure. And as Buddhism became popular in the West, he got left behind. Scholars like Buswell and Lopez, whose Princeton Dictionary of Buddhism is one of the field's standard references, treat Kshitigarbha as a major Mahayana Bodhisattva, especially central to East Asian Buddhist practice. Generations of practitioners across East Asia have grown up with him, in their temples, at their roadsides, at the edges of their cemeteries, for over 1,000 years. That silence says something about how Buddhism traveled west and what it left behind. His names shift as you move across Asia. Chinese, Dìzàng Púsà; Japanese, Jizō; Korean, Jijang Bosal. Different languages, different visual traditions, the same vow underneath all of them. Tara, Guanyin, Padmasambhava. Figures who each redefined what compassion looks like. Every one of them pointing, in their own way, toward liberation as the final horizon. Kshitigarbha points somewhere different. He made compassion into a location. He chose the worst place in existence, and he didn't leave. Unlike many bodhisattvas shown draped in celestial jewels on lotus thrones, he wears simple monk's robes. Associated in East Asia with the monk prince Jin Chayojue, venerated at Mount Juhua as an incarnation of Ksitigarbha himself. He looks like someone who belongs there permanently, not passing through. He carries a wish-fulfilling jewel that generates light in the deepest realms, and a staff with 6 rings, one for each of the 6 realms of existence he walks through. The staff forces hell's gates open. The jewel illuminates the darkness it enters rather than destroying it. He doesn't come to eliminate where he's going. He comes to remain inside it. In East Asian traditions, he became the specific guardian of beings in the dangerous passage after death, especially those facing the hell realms. The moment when beings are most disoriented, most vulnerable, most in need of someone who made an active choice to be there. The sutra records something else. Before Shakyamuni Buddha passed into parinirvana, he charged Ksitigarbha specifically, with the care of all beings across the long age, between this moment and the arrival of the next Buddha, Maitreya. Between the Buddha who passed and the Buddha still to come, he is the one who keeps watch. The vow wasn't only made by Ksitigarbha, it was given by the Buddha himself. To understand how a being arrives at that commitment, you have to go back. To 2 women, 2 mothers, 2 daughters who descended toward the worst place in existence, and came back carrying a vow that would never expire. The Kshitigarbha Sutra, the central East Asian scripture about his vows, doesn't open with a cosmic deity descending from the heavens. It opens with a daughter who watched her mother die and refused to accept what came next. The setting matters. The Buddha teaches this sutra in Triyastrimsha heaven, a celestial realm he ascended to specifically to teach his own deceased mother. From the very first line, this text declares what it's about: death, parents, the kind of love that doesn't stop at the edge of a grave. The whole scripture breathes filial devotion. The sutra gives multiple past life stories of this vow being made and remade. 2 of those stories live at the heart of everything: 2 daughters, 2 mothers, 2 descents toward hell. The point is clear before we even begin. This vow does not appear out of nowhere. It is renewed through grief, through devotion, through the refusal to abandon the dead. First story. A Brahmin's daughter, the sutra calls her the sacred girl, whose mother spent her entire life dismissing the 3 jewels: the Buddha, the Dharma, the Sangha. Every opening for practice, turned away. Every teaching, refused. She dies, and she falls into a Vichi hell. A Vichi, the deepest hell realm in this Buddhist cosmology. The name means without interruption. No mercy breaks. No moments where the weight lifts slightly. The full consequence of accumulated harm, playing out without pause. The sacred girl sells everything she owns. She makes offerings to a Buddha of that age, known in the sutra as Enlightenment Flower Samadhi. She meditates with complete devotion, directing every act of practice toward her mother's liberation. And through that practice, she reaches the boundary of hell itself. She calls across it. A hell official, the sutra names him King No Poison, meets her at the boundary and tells her, in the sutra's account, her devotion arrived here before she did. Her mother has already been released from that realm. She didn't need to descend. Her practice reached further than her body could. Her mother was already moving. The second story is harder. A woman named Brilliant Eyes. Her mother loved eating fish eggs. To modern ears, that sounds almost trivially minor. But in the world of this sutra, it points to repeated harm toward vulnerable life, accumulated across years. She dies condemned. Brilliant Eyes gives away everything. She commissions Buddha images. She dedicates every form of practice she knows. She receives a vision. Her mother communicates, through the sutra's account, that her daughter's practice found her. And then, her mother is reborn, as a child, in the same household, and dies again at 13, and falls again. Brilliant Eyes asks Pure Lotus Eye Tathagata, the Buddha of that age, how long this cycle will continue. The answer does not soften anything. Many lifetimes of difficult rebirth still ahead. This is why Kshitigarbha became so powerful in East Asia specifically. His story doesn't begin with abstract compassion for all beings. It begins with a child trying to save a parent. In Chinese Buddhist culture, that landed at the deepest level, filial piety, the love and obligation a child holds toward their parents, was already one of the deepest moral languages in the culture. Kshitigarbha didn't replace that. He transformed it. What you cultivate through practice does not belong only to you. It can be dedicated outward. Love for one mother became a vow for all beings. After the second vision, the future Kshitigarbha stands before him and makes the vow. The vow is often summarized in one brutal sentence. Until the hells are empty, I shall not become a Buddha. In the world of this sutra, hell realms were not metaphors. They were realms, with names, with causes, with beings caught in karmic worlds shaped by actions, habits, and harm across specific lifetimes. And Kshitigarbha didn't make his vow about a psychological state. He made it about those places, those beings, right now. The sutra maps the hell realms with unsettling precision. The harm done, the realm it produces, a cartography of karma. Not hell as a vague threat, but hell as a landscape. Gates, officials, cries, consequences, and beings who cannot yet see the way out. The tradition imagines Ksitigarbha moving through these realms, speaking with hell officials, standing beside beings most people would rather forget. Imagine a being who caused harm until cruelty became habit. They don't arrive because a creator god condemned them from outside. They arrive inside consequences shaped by their own actions. And before they can see a way through, Ksitigarbha is already there. He doesn't explain. He doesn't offer a lecture on what went wrong. He stands beside them. Now imagine another being, someone who harmed through confusion, fear, or blindness. Different cause, different story, same darkness. Ksitigarbha makes no distinction between those who seem to deserve his presence and those who don't. In this framework, every being in a hell realm arrived through karma shaped by ignorance, the cruel and the confused, the deliberate and the lost. He walks beside all of them. His response to that is presence. Avicii, the deepest. His vow reaches even there, especially there, where the weight of extreme harm plays out without pause. One distinction worth holding. Buddhist hell realms are temporary. Beings exhaust their karma and eventually move on. Ksitigarbha doesn't overturn that process. He doesn't cancel what was done. He is not there to erase karma. He is there so karma is not endured alone. And that matters more than it might sound. There is a particular weight to suffering no one sees. Pain is one thing, abandonment is another. Ksitigarbha's vow answers that second wound. Every being in every hell realm, counted, witnessed, not alone. In Chinese Buddhist devotion, practitioners call his name Namo Dìzàng Púsà. In Japan, the same devotion becomes Namu Jizō Bosatsu. It can be a prayer, it can be a plea. But deeper than that, it is recognition. Not magic, not a transaction. Recognition. People call his name in hospitals, at graves, in the years after a loss when the grief stops being acute and becomes simply the permanent texture of a life. In the middle of the night, when nothing terrible is happening, but something that happened a long time ago still hasn't resolved. Namo Dìzàng Púsà. An acknowledgement that wherever the darkness is, someone chose to remain. And that refusal, to leave when leaving would be easy, generates the question the vow was always going to produce, the one nobody wants to ask out loud. Hell is never going to be empty. At least, taken literally, that is the impossible pressure inside this vow. Not because Ksitigarbha isn't trying. Because in Buddhist cosmology, beings cycle through existence endlessly. New beings generate new karma. New karma produces new consequences. For every being he walks beside through the darkness, more arrive behind them. He is bailing out an ocean with a cup. He understood this when he made the vow. He knew exactly what he was committing to. And he keeps bailing. Taken literally, the vow creates a paradox at the center of everything. If suffering keeps arising, if beings keep cycling through samsara, generating the karma that produces the consequences he is committed to keeping watch over, his work never ends, which means he never becomes a Buddha. One of the tradition's great figures of compassion made a vow that indefinitely defers his own liberation. Different traditions handle this differently. Some read the vow as directional, a commitment so vast it functions as an orientation rather than a contract, a compass more than a deadline, a vow that shapes every moment of how he moves through existence, even if its technical completion never arrives. Others take it completely literally, and they find it more profound for being impossible, not less. Read almost like a koan, the vow becomes stranger the longer you hold it. A vow that cannot be kept is not a failed vow. It is a vow that keeps you. If enlightenment were something you could achieve and then retire into, a state you enter and seal behind you, it would be smaller than compassion itself. Remove the impossibility, and the whole thing collapses into something lesser. In our Mara video, we saw temptation appear as an elegant offer of withdrawal, peace purchased by stepping away from the world's suffering. Kshitigarbha's answer to that offer is his entire existence. He refuses any peace that requires leaving beings behind. And there is always someone behind. The vow isn't a strategy, it is a declaration of what he is. Kshitigarbha doesn't keep watch in hell because he believes he'll empty it. He keeps watch because the alternative is abandonment. And abandonment is the one thing the vow makes impossible. The impossibility is not a flaw in the vow, it is the vow. And somehow, across 1,000 years, across an entire ocean, that declaration found its way into something very small, a knee-height stone figure, standing at the edge of a Japanese road, wearing a red bib, a pinwheel spinning beside it in the rain. If you've ever been to Japan, you've seen him. You walked past him at a cemetery entrance, at a mountain pass, at the edge of a trail where the stone has worn smooth from decades of rain and reaching hands. His bib faded, a small stone freshly placed in his lap by someone whose name you'll never know. You saw him. His name never came up. The Bodhisattva of infinite hell realms became, in Japan, the most intimate spiritual presence in the entire culture. Protector of travelers, guardian of children, witness of the dead, from infinite to knee-height, from Avicii to the edge of a country road. The practice is called Mizuko Jizō. Mizuko, water child, is the Japanese term for a life lost to miscarriage, stillbirth, or early death. A life that began, then vanished before it could unfold. In some Japanese devotional traditions, people understand these children as vulnerable in the passage after death. Not guilty, not condemned, vulnerable. In one popular Japanese Buddhist legend, children who die young face a particular torment. On the bank of the Sanzu River, the river the dead must cross, they must pile stones, one by one, to atone for the grief they caused their parents by leaving too soon. Every time the pile nears completion, demons knock it down. The child begins again, and again, without end. Jizō walks to that riverbank. He gathers the children into his robes, shelters them from the demons, and carries them through what comes next. When they cannot walk, he walks for them. Parents come to his statues. They dress him. Red bibs, because red is the color of childhood in Japan, the color you put on a living child. They dress the stone the way they would have dressed the child they didn't get to dress. They place pinwheels beside him, so their child has something to play with. And the stones. Each stone placed in a Jizō's lap is the stone their child no longer has to pile. A weight transferred, the torment interrupted. A name said out loud, finally, to someone who would listen without flinching, without offering a solution that doesn't exist, without looking away. Jizō statues across Japan. So many that once you notice them, you start seeing them everywhere. Many of them anonymous now, weathered beyond their original features, standing at crossroads that no longer exist, in cemeteries that have grown up around them over centuries, still wearing their bibs, still holding their stones, still there. The Bodhisattva of infinite hell realms is also the small stone guardian collecting the weight of human grief one red bib at a time. Infinite compassion and intimate grief are not two different expressions of the same thing. They are the same thing. The vast and the intimate, the hell descender and the knee-height stone in the rain, become one figure, one vow, one act of refusing to leave. Kshitigarbha walked into hell. A choice, freely made. And the choice was this: I will not be free while others are suffering. His name means earth treasury, earth womb. The earth holds everything, the seed, the grief, the stone, the rain. It gives itself completely to whatever falls into it, whatever needs it, whatever has nowhere else to go. Ksitigarbha is that quality of reality, infinite, patient, indiscriminate, given a face and a vow, and a staff with 6 rings. Somewhere right now, in a cemetery in Japan, a stone figure stands in the rain. A parent placed a red bib there, maybe last week, maybe this morning. That parent didn't need a theology. They didn't need a map of the hell realms or a doctrinal argument. They needed to know someone was keeping watch over their child in the dark. Ksitigarbha said yes to that, without condition, without end. To be seen in that darkness by someone who chose to be there, that is not nothing. It may be everything. Namo Dìzàng Púsà. Namo Dìzàng Púsà. Namo Dìzàng Púsà. Homage to the one who stayed. Ksitigarbha might be the one that stays with me longest. Not because he wins, not because he escapes, not because he solves hell, because he refuses to abandon anyone inside it. The Tara, Guanyin, and Padmasambhava videos are linked below. Each one gives a different answer to the same question. What does compassion look like when it refuses to abandon anyone? Which story stays with you the most? Tara, Guanyin, Padmasambhava, or Ksitigarbha? Tell me below. See you in the next one.